And welcome to another edition of Odyssey House Journeys. I'm Trip Mitchell.
Journals.
Journal. The name of the show is?
Odyssey House Journals.
And the name of the host is?
Trip Mitchell and Randall Carlisle.
The name of our guest is?
Sharon Ewer.
Wow, we have gotten everything out. And the
Is
reason
that good for the test?
well, just we.
At my age, I'm having trouble remembering anything, so that was.
What was funny, we just started the show about 2 minutes ago, and I got the name of the show wrong, and so we're having some fun. But the purpose of
and the number is 801-322-3222. Now that's all I have to remember for the rest of the show. Okay?
Yeah, and really, Randall, and you've done a wonderful job.
Okay, thanks.
So the reason that we're here today, aside from having some fun, is to talk about addiction and recovery here in the state of Utah, because there are a lot of people that are affected by addiction more than you can ever know. The
thousands and thousands.
And it cuts across all socioeconomic groups. It cuts across religion, culture, anything. Addiction is something that is so powerful.
I would be willing to bet that anybody watching, or if you talk to anybody in your ward or your church or your school or whatever social gathering you're at, everybody in that group is either related to somebody or knows somebody who is dealing with an addiction issue.
I think that is so correct, and you might be surprised as to how many people are really suffering from addiction. But the good news, and the reason that we're here, is to talk about the thousands of people who are super dedicated to helping you out and to helping the state of Utah. And so each and every week we come to you, and we want to thank Bill Francis with Comcast, who puts us up on Channel 17. We're also available as a podcast on numerous platforms.
iTunes, Spotify.
And I guess we have listeners all over the world.
I'm glad you asked me that, Trip.
You know, we did not prepare this.
But we called up the analytics before I came out from the office today, and this is a list of the countries where people have listened to this podcast. So it's Switzerland, the United Kingdom, Russia, France, Israel, Netherlands, Brazil, Ukraine. I mean, and there's a second page. I mean, it's incredible. It baffles me why anybody would watch this or listen to this in those countries. But if you are, thank you.
And addiction is
You're
something...
welcome to fly to Salt Lake City to get help, but
or to be a guest in our studio audience.
Yeah, if you can, we'll make you a deal. If you're watching in one of those foreign countries and you make it to Salt Lake City, we'll put you on the podcast if you get a hold of us at Odyssey House.
That sounds like a heck of a deal.
Yeah.
And Randall has got a lot of money, so he might augment you on the hotel once you get here. But that's another story.
If you couldn't hear that on the mic, he claims I have a lot of money and I might help you. I'll take you out for a meal if you come here. Okay?
That's perfect.
All
so
right.
let's introduce me to our guest once again.
This is Sharon, and she came up to me. We recently had Recovery Day, which is a day when everybody in recovery goes to the Gallivan Plaza in Salt Lake City to celebrate the fact that they're in recovery. And she walked up to me and introduced herself, and I'm so glad you did, saying that she was a graduate from Odyssey House back in
1989.
1989. And
I just got married and I met my wife in 1989.
Wow.
And it took 30 years to get married.
Well, and what I found interesting was the fact that, you know, we keep records of people who have completed the program or graduated, but in terms of long-term people, you know, we lose track of them, and so it's really great to have somebody come up, and you're still clean and sober today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
and what is wonderful, and our gentleman who makes this all possible, Lee, has been clean and sober for 44 years. 44 years. So
He's behind the camera, by
Yes.
the way. Yeah.
So I'll do the math. So you've got 30 years.
Yes.
Lee's got 44 years. Between the two of you, you've got a lot of years. At least 15.
That's why he does TV and not anything else.
Not the math department.
So before we talk about and the thing that's really interesting is how Odyssey's program is probably one of the toughest around still, but back when she went through it, it was really tough. But maybe you can tell us your story about how you got into it, and we were sort of joking about the drugs that you were hooked on as opposed to what's going on today.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a 2-time Odyssey House graduate. my first time I graduated in '88. After multiple rehabs, I graduated to the more hardcore program, and I did that program for 9 months, relapsed, and I was taken back in handcuffs in 6 months, and handcuffs to Odyssey House and completed in 6 months, and been sober since.
And the drug you were on?
Coke.
See, not heroin, not meth, but cocaine.
Normal
An
stuff.
old-fashioned
Normal
girl.
stuff compared to today. Coke
But
and acid
yet
and pot
it-
and drinking.
Yeah,
It's
Robin
so-
Williams, the late Robin Williams, had a great line about cocaine. He said, it's God's way of saying you've got too much money. I thought that was very appropriate, but it was very rampant in Salt Lake in the 80s.
It was. And I was with this man that was 3 times older than I was, and I never paid for it, but I paid for it in different ways.
And
So-
so how'd you get involved with a boyfriend or whatever? Or?
Yeah, so my dad was abusive, so I just started reaching out, and this man, I used to babysit for this family, and they always had an adult there for some reason, and there I was at 11, and he's 35, and for the next 3 years, it was a very inappropriate relationship. Basically, my body for all the drugs I wanted.
At age 11?
11, and it went on until I was almost 15, when I was a runaway and crossed state lines with them.
Boy, well, that's quite a story. And
did
he supplied you cocaine.
Cocaine, oh yes.
Alcohol?
Cocaine, pot, drinking, everything. I had drank before I met him, and I grew up in West Jordan. We smoked pot in the fields. All that was normal.
But your family was part of the church.
My family, my mom taught me everything I knew about the church. My dad my dad was drinking back then. He was post-traumatic stress from Vietnam, and so it wasn't the best at my house. My mom had to work 18 hours a day to support 7 children.
Oh my gosh.
So
Wow.
I think we just all acted out in our own way, and that man, as awful as it sounds, what he did, it hurt less than what my dad was doing at home.
So PTSD, a lot of veterans from Vietnam suffered it,
Yes,
but additionally, a lot of kids of those veterans suffered it as well.
yes.
And so you went through an awful. Did the person who abused you, who you babysat for, did he ever go to jail?
He did. So 3 years later, when I had crossed state lines with them, when I went back to Odyssey House, while I was in Odyssey House, 2 things happened that I think is the reason I'm still sober today, and that's that he was arrested and sent to prison for sexual offenses towards minors and drug charges. And then my dad threatened my mom, and an undercover cop heard it, and he threatened my dad, and my dad left and never came home. So it was the first time leaving a rehab without either one of them, those influences.
So that was a huge. So in your situation, you had such challenges, even at the age of 11,
Yes.
that the idea of a drug or alcohol just took you away.
Yeah, it probably was what made me not kill myself, honestly, because the word incomprehensible demoralization I knew before I even.
You know
drank.
what's amazing is this conversation that Lee and I had just a little while ago about alcohol. In my experience, alcohol never makes anything better. It postpones the agony. But
No.
suicide is something that is so. That's
Final.
That's a
Yeah.
decision
Well,
you make.
and my brother did commit suicide, so I believe that it was because of how he grew up, and he did continue with alcohol. He was in the Navy. I didn't know that people in the Navy killed themselves, but I'm pretty sure the way we grew up, and he was the oldest. Me and him took the brunt of it. I'm pretty sure.
You talk about this sort of matter-of-factly now, so you've gone through a lot of therapy to be able to deal with it and to be, and part of the Odyssey, or part of any program in terms of getting sober is to be honest and open about what's
Yes.
happened, and that makes things not better for what they were, but it makes it easier to deal with as an adult. So what all did you go through to get to the point you're at now?
Well, Odyssey House certainly was a huge part. They taught me skills that saved my life. Back then it was much harder than it is now. We've talked about, but
Maybe describe that, okay?
Well, we used to have.
Could you describe a day at Odyssey House?
Yeah, so remember I was in the adolescent program, and even in the adolescent program, you get up, you go to school, you have functioning hours. If you don't do your laundry during the functioning hours, you wear dirty clothes. So you learn real quick. You're 15 minutes early or you're late. We also would have encounter groups at night, and if nobody would talk to the issue, an encounter group is where you're confronting each other. If nobody would confront the issue, you could GI until the next day.
GI means
They
what?
like cleaning, deep cleaning, and they would break you down and build you up, and you would have to also wear these signs around your neck.
You were telling me that.
Yeah,
one
that's
night.
like, I'm aggressive, or I'm passive aggressive, or I'm angry. All things like that, and then you'd have to go to the group and say, okay, I've learned from my behavior, and can I take my sign down?
I've got a sign that says I'm good at math.
You need more work.
Okay.
So, how is that helpful? I mean, to me, it sounds sort of like shaming,
Well-
which is what we as addicts all feel a lot for what we've done.
Well, I think what happened is I knew such shame anyway. So, I mean, that was what was happening in the groups, what was happening inside therapy. At first when we had individual sessions with the therapist, I would go into fetal positions because I hated myself. I didn't know how I got there. I mean, all I knew at that point was either physical abuse or sexual abuse. So how to function in the real world,
Yeah.
that took a little bit of work. But I learned real quick. We had a sexual abuse group, and it took me a long time, even probably not even until I had children of my own, to understand fully what happened to me. And anyway, when we would finally cry or break through, they didn't give you Kleenexes. Like you probably
So
in
your
group,
nose is running.
right. They said, no, we're not stopping that pain. You need to let it go. And so I was able to, in the individual groups in individual sessions, let it go, so that when I'm dealing with the encounters and all that stuff, the signs, it really wasn't as bad as what I'd already dealt with. It really was more of a safe way to handle confrontation, because we all have to handle confrontation,
Sure.
right? But having encounters or cleaning the house was not as bad as what I grew up with in my house.
Well, I guess not.
So when you were going through Odyssey, you were a teenager.
Yes.
How would that feel? Did you feel amazingly alone, yet kind of connected to other people with the same challenges? Talk about that.
I did. One of the things that, I'm not sure how it is now, but back then we used to do a lot of things with the adult house as well. And I still have connections with the adult house because they stayed. And some of them were in the same groups with the minors. And I think just knowing that even, when you're young and you're watching older people struggle with the same thing, you don't feel alone. I'm the only graduate that I know of that have stayed sober since my time in Odyssey House. I have not talked to, I've only seen one other graduate since.
Wow.
So, but I have seen multiple of the adults since.
And the statistics are not great. They're not super bad. Roughly, in a great program, maybe 5 out of 10 people will stay sober. Is that a fair number?
We don't have long-term results is the problem. We only have results of how many people have completed our program, and we have the best completion rate of any treatment center in Utah, and that's about 65 to 70% completing the program. But in terms of, and you and I were talking about this earlier, we send out emails and letters to people who have gone on from our program and ask them how they're doing today. And if we just based our numbers on the returns we get from that, it'd be like 98% successful, because the only people who return are the people who are staying clean and sober, but the people who relapse don't return anything. So I don't know.
And
That makes a lot of sense.
there was an email when I graduated, so I've never
It
received.
didn't exist.
I never received an email, but I
So-
can tell you, 30 years later, I'm still clean and sober.
That is amazing. And we are not in any way, shape, or form saying that Odyssey House is the
No.
only answer.
No.
It is a solution for many people. And the number that we've got up on the bottom of the screen, and for those of you listening on a podcast,
801-322-3222. Now, see, I might
Show
forget
31.
that someday, so I'm glad you remember that.
as long as you start it. But the number is for Odyssey House. And what I say each and every show is that sometimes when you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, if you can share that with one person, call. The people at Odyssey House know that people are calling in from the show, and they've got resources, they've got numbers to call, there are other treatment centers.
Speaking of that, she works at one. Tell us about that.
So I work at Papilon House. It's sober living. I work with women and some of the men as well. I'd say about 80% of our clients are coming from the prison, and they just go from I always joke, inmate to intake that day. And
It's Papilon House.
Papilon House.
And how would people get a hold of Papilon House?
They could probably contact me. I'm sorry, I don't have their number.
No,
with
that's
me, I should
okay.
say,
But you could Google it.
Yeah, you could Google Papilon House, and any one of us are more than happy.
Now, are you
to help.
associated with the church?
I am. I'm an actual addiction recovery missionary for the LDS Church as well. So I
So-
feel like my life has been blessed. And
So this is something that I did not know the church had, and I'm super impressed.
thank you.
Because the perception of the church is that because no one drinks in the church, which is not the case. I mean, I'm a big boy, I understand that. But that drugs and alcohol are not a challenge. Not that people in the church don't have challenges. Those are not the perceived challenges, but nothing could be further from the truth.
Right. We have recovery meetings just like AA, NACA. I've been doing meetings for the church for many, many years. I'm on my now second mission, an addiction recovery mission. My first mission, I served at Orange Street Halfway House, similar to the women I'm serving now in my work. And then I'm on my second mission now, and I really feel like.
Is your bike parked out there?
No, I drove my car.
Oh, okay.
She doesn't have a badge on.
Yeah.
I took my badge off. I did leave the mission correlation meeting before I came here.
Okay.
So I joke about how I went from Sister Ewer to Sharon Ewer,
Okay.
or vice versa. But I really am blessed because I know that my past had a purpose, right? And today I get to live out what that purpose is.
And there really is a big difference. I've noticed when you're in recovery yourself and have your own story, you can communicate better with the people you're working with. Can you sort of describe that? I mean, it's not like you're like, a PhD psychiatrist or something. It's like, hey, I was there too. How's that work?
I think it works wonders. And in my case, at the age of 14, I was getting told that this man that I've talked about, so he was trying to get me in prostitution circles. And I'm glad I was spared that because I turned myself in and kind of had to have some trust. But the women I work with, most of them have been abused. Most of them have prostitution in their backgrounds. And I can say, look, I know what this feels like. I know how you want to self-sabotage. But let me tell you what I have done or what treatment has worked for me that maybe will work for you. And a matter of fact, the women, like I was a runner, and some of them are runners, and I make them sign a little contract with me when they feel like they're going to run. Hey, I will not run. I'm promising Sharon I won't run. She didn't run, so she's not going to let me run, and we have a little contract. And because Papillon means butterfly, I seal it with a butterfly. And they get a copy, and I get a copy. And so when they're having a hard day, I pull out the contract, or if I'm having a hard day, they can pull out the contract. And I think also if they see that I'm honest, if I,
Sure.
I have a pretty good most days, but some days I'm not good either. And I can say, what, not the greatest day ever.
So you come from a background that is very much different than many people in the church.
Yes.
That gives you a unique perspective. Randall was alluding to it, that because you've been through a lot of these challenges. Do you go about helping to train other people within the church?
I do. Yes.
So they're utilizing your tough background.
Yes, and I also have participated on a podcast on LDS.org on the 12 steps. I participated in 6 of the 12.
Really?
Where I got to tell my story, and that went worldwide as well. And
Wow.
I never.
Do you have more countries that have listened to you than our podcast?
They probably have.
I've heard that. I've heard from people. My Facebook actually went up to 5,000 people because they only allow 5,000.
She's got to speak.
I was talking
Randall,
to people all over. I talked to people in India who said that they were in a treatment program celebrating my birthday, and I have friends all over the world now, Iran, Bangladesh, and the story is the same. I've even had people from Pakistan reach out to me, and yet the women there can't talk about it because it can be death.
Sure.
And I'm able to share my story with them underground, and that's, what God has done with my, this story that seems so big is he's made it big in a way that works for him, not not for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting is someone who's not a member of the church, your mission probably is so much more encompassing and changes people probably more than any other missionary. That sounds ridiculous to say, but you have an opportunity because of your background and the way the church is helping out to really, really affect a lot of people who could then in turn affect a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so. I always do still tell the people I serve on my mission, they don't need a badge to be a missionary. They just need to get each other to the meetings. They need to get each other away from the next drug and the next drink. They need to get each other to a safe place. And if they're doing that, they're missionaries. And that's what I've been telling for years and years now. And I'm still in touch with the women from Orange Street, and some of them are still sober. And they will send me messages all the time. Don't worry, I'm still sober. I'm still taking them. I'm still a missionary. I go, yes, you are.
That is so cool.
Better than anybody.
Wow.
What percent would you say of the people in the LDS Church who are active have a challenge? Is there any number that you've heard?
I think I haven't heard a number, but I would say it's more than people think. And a matter of fact, one of our facilitators was the mission companion to Elder Holland. And he went to Elder Holland and said, why isn't this talked about more? And Elder Holland stopped the ensign at press right then and got an article about the addiction program in the ensign. And then if you've heard general conferences at all ever since, but every conference, and they've talked about addiction or depression, and have really done more to get this out there.
Well, that is so impressive, and the fact that the church is aware of this challenge.
Yeah, years ago, I'm sure the LDS Church would not have admitted or publicly said, okay, we have members who have problems too, so let's start a program. And
in the Catholic Church, they have had at least a high incidence of priests with drinking problems. Yeah. And it was, became a real problem, and something the Catholic Church reached out in the 60s to try to counsel priests.
Well, look how long it's taken the Catholic Church to talk about priest sexual abuse. It's forever.
Exactly, and if this had come out 50 years ago, I just read over the weekend the Archdiocese of New York had to go bankrupt. One of the richest,
because of the lawsuits.
Yeah,
sure.
One of the richest organizations in religion. So the fact that the LDS Church has seen that there's a problem and is working towards it sounds like something that's pretty darn smart.
And just one thing to give you a history, the church's addiction program has been around about 35 years.
Okay.
So
Papilon House, is it for people of LDS faith only?
It is not. Probably most of our people are not LDS.
And coming out of prison, is it a situation where when an individual gets out of prison that they have to go to a treatment center? Is that part of their getting probation? Or?
Yes, but some of them are there because they want to be, are not court-ordered to be there, but some of them are.
Our first guest, and then she came back again, was a young lady who, when we first saw her a year or so ago, was facing federal prison time, and not a little bit, quite a bit, and chose to go into Odyssey House. Even though I thought if that were me and I was currently drinking, I would drink up to the day I went in.
Because she was virtually guaranteed of a 10-year federal prison term for delivering a large quantity of meth. But as Tripp was going to say, she self-admitted herself to Odyssey House. She had about 5 or 6 months before her trial and successfully completed Odyssey House. And because she did so well and she worked with the courts, she was just given probation and no prison term. And she's doing great now.
Phenomenal.
Wonderful.
And it is one of those stories. And
yeah.
If you take a look at why people are locked up in this day and age, it's drugs and alcohol. Really is. Drugs, people have a drug issue and they will do whatever it takes to get those drugs, so it includes a lot of crime. We are putting people in prison who should be in treatment.
Agreed.
And that's why we have the highest rate of incarceration in the world.
Yep.
And it's a tough situation. So if you could talk to your 11-year-old you, what would you say?
I actually think about her often, and I would first of all hug her and say, look what you've done with your life since you were 11, and look what God did to you. he used you for a good purpose. And yeah, it sucked at the time. A matter of fact, today is my mom's birthday. She passed away in January. And I've said many times that I know I'm sober because of her tears and her prayers. And I would
She
say,
must have been amazingly proud of you.
yeah, I think she told me many times, and I was proud of her, and I was grateful for her example. And I just believe that, and a matter of fact, I got to be with my mom last 2 weeks of her life, day and night. And I would tell my 11-year-old self, probably, Mom, look what I did. Mom, you know what? It was worth throwing me in treatment day in. And, you know, she threw me in treatment 6 times. She was the one that got all my blame and anger. And I would say I've done it. And I would also say, look what you're going to go through some stuff. You're going to go through some stuff. At 11, I would tell myself, you're going to go through some stuff in this life. I'm 45 now. I have 5 children, 8 grandchildren. None of them were even a thought when I got sober. And that you don't have to give up. Life has been worth living. Life has been worth doing. And it's been great to be sober, to do that life. And I wouldn't be if I had kept using. I know I wouldn't, because they say jails, institutions, and death. And I'd already been arrested and in 6 treatment centers before the age of 15.
6 treatment centers?
Before the age of 15. 2-time Odyssey House graduate by then.
Wow. And Randall,
it's an amazing story, and I'm.
So you're kind of a conduit. When you go out, because of your position as being a newsman, people do come up and they kind of...
I was at the Odyssey booth, so that's at Recovery Day. So she came up, and I am so glad you did, because...
Why didn't we have a booth?
What would you call it?
Well, I'd screw up the name of the show, which is pretty much my MO. But
Yeah.
we, you know, all joking aside, your position as a news guy before you worked at Odyssey House allows you to meet a lot of people.
Oh,
But
sure.
there are so many amazing stories out there, and yours is right up there. This is, I mean, and again, Randall pointed it out, having been through what you've been through, you can talk to anyone. Because I don't think there would be anyone that you would talk to about addiction and recovery who's had it any worse.
Or sexual abuse as a
Yeah.
very young girl. I mean, yeah, you have the makings of a movie. Is what I mean, no offense, but you know, it's an incredible story, and what a journey. I mean, you've blown me away. You didn't, and she didn't tell me any of this. She just told me that I graduated from Odyssey House in whatever year. What year was it? See, I forget.
I had
1989.
89 is last
89.
time.
You know, and I just said, hey.
And 88 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And your story is amazing. And so we'll throw up, Lee will throw up on the bottom of the screen for those of you watching on Comcast 17, Papilon's email address and
Yes.
phone number.
Yes.
And we'll have that in the bottom of the screen. Otherwise, if you want to reach out, for those of you listening, just Google Papilon House in Salt Lake.
Yes.
And how much do you charge for fee? How does that work for Papilon?
There is a fee. Most of our clients are Medicaid funded.
Okay.
So there is some private. The housing is about $800 a month, and then the treatment. I don't really deal with that part, so I'm not sure. But when I get back to the office, I'll make sure I send you the information, the contact information
Okay.
for Papilon House. It's a wonderful program as well. I don't think in today's world you can go wrong. What treatment you do, I just know I'm blessed that I did the Odyssey House program back 30 years ago. I just know for a fact that it saved my life today. I know
Well,
that for a fact.
Well, you have been an amazing guest, and I feel really, I was going to use the term blessed, but
You can
Feel-
use the term blessed.
I feel
It's
blessed
okay.
to have met you, and
I agree.
for you to tell our story has made for an amazing show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I say thank you. I'm so glad. I mean, it's so fortuitous that you came up and talked to me, and it was just like, hey, you need to be on our podcast. So thank you for coming up to me. I mean, and introducing yourself. I appreciate it.
Thank
For
you.
those of you with some great stories to tell, you can reach out to Randall at 801
322-3222. See, you got
Odyssey
it
House.
down.
Give them a call. Let them know about your story. We want to introduce our viewing audience to as many people who've really affected people so positively. And coming up in our now that we're past 30 shows, we've I think met some really amazing
Oh,
people.
we have. And
And
if you're in Russia, don't forget, if you come here, you can be on our show.
Wow, and that'd be
for our one viewer there.
And you get dinner.
Yeah, and dinner, and dinner. Yes.
Aeroflot has a nonstop from Moscow to Salt Lake City. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. And if you get a chance, tell people about this show. We really enjoy doing it and like to have as many people as possible listen and or watch. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.